Welcome back to the PreVetted Podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today, I'm joined by JJ Friedman. He's Director of Product Engineering at Remine, now part of Place. JJ climbed from senior engineer to tech lead to director over nearly 5 years, leading the same product engineering organization throughout the company's move into Place. He's an exceptional engineer leader, and outside of work, he's a serious Audi enthusiast. JJ, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Federico. Excited to be here.
I'm honored to have you here today. So for people, meeting you for the first time, can you describe a little bit more of what you're doing?
Yeah, so I currently head up the team at Remine for both product engineering and now product. Like you mentioned, we've recently got acquired by Place. So we basically focus high level on delivering solutions to real estate agents and the larger MLSs. So it's both from a data and listing standpoint, as well as prospecting and providing tools that agents would use to grow their business, understand the market, do research, all those fun stuff that agents do to make money.
Right. Yeah, I think that the MLS platform that has been built, it's amazing. I've been seeing it firsthand. Yeah. So you studied philosophy and economics, right? How did you end up in engineering?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I went to college for basketball, was always planning on becoming a basketball player, never thought about what happens after basketball. I think a lot of athletes go through the similar experience. Their mindset is set on one thing. And they never realize the realities. So when I went to Occidental, I never even thought about anything other than that until I experienced, the amazing academics there. And I started in the economics department. That was kind of the business degree, kind of the degree everyone ended up getting. And then I discovered philosophy. It just happened. Occidental is a liberal arts college, so they require you to take general studies classes to kind of see what you would be interested in, instead of just kind of going straight to your major and just sticking with that. So one of those courses was Philosophy 101 or Intro to Philosophy. And I absolutely fell in love, kind of connected to everything about it. And that's how I kind of got into that world, learned a lot about formal logic, how to think about problems, how to question things, basically not looking at the world very literally and very there's always an answer. There's always a different way to look at it. So that's how I got started in that world. And then after my basketball career ended, injury like most, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, what was my next career. So I actually started as a real estate agent in the real estate space, selling homes in the Los Angeles area, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, and started to learn that business from a real estate agent side. It wasn't until I met my wife today where she kind of realized that I wasn't happy doing it. I'm not much of a salesperson like that. I think some people would say that, maybe I can communicate, but sales was something that I was looking to do. And I always, for fun, I'm a big video game addict. I love to play video games. I used to do video games projects. I actually would commit to a lot of open source projects. And, I would just I wouldn't call it necessarily I guess it was the old school version of vibe coding, where I would look at problems that applications would have in open source, and I would kind of say, hey, these are problems, and developers would start taking them over. That's how I got into the open source community. And that's when my wife was like, you should really pursue this as a full-time job. So that's when I did a boot camp, started learning actually the foundations of software engineering, and decided that I actually wanted to go more into the product development side and, web application websites, stuff like that, as kind of JavaScript at the time was, the dominant language. It was kind of where everyone was entering, and built out my knowledge of how to be an engineer, read a lot of books, did the boot camps, did a lot of open source projects, ended up actually getting one of the projects I started, ended up getting picked up by an incubator studio. From there ended up looking at different full-time jobs once I realized open source had their limitations to try to build a career. And that's when I fell into Remine and kind of got started there.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I think that the the engineering mindset is something that we were born with and we don't realize it. It's about, just seeing a problem and trying to figure out how can we solve it, right? And in that process, we learn a lot, right? Yeah, I've done something similar with open source. I mean, I was at Microsoft first, and then I went 180, and I went all open source with Ruby, JavaScript, and all that stuff. Before JavaScript was something as big as it is today, right? ECMAScript, I think it was called before, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and the amount of things that you can learn from an open source project is huge because you can see everything. Whereas when I was working with compile libraries, you basically have a binary. You have no access to it, just the documentation, and that's it, right?
Yep. Yep. It's super interesting that it's what you're describing is kind of where I fell in love with it and everything, because I used to always think, and the reason why I would never fully commit to engineering, even though I was like, I knew all, I'm a big internet guy. I'm deep on the internet. I know, I know all the different, I know all the different Reddits and forums, and I was very interested in learning different stuff, and I wanted to build video games. So that's when, naturally you had all these open source projects, and I was like, oh, I'm using I was using Unity and trying to build stuff and using different tooling. And I was like, we should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And I realized my mind was always very product oriented, and how do you build products and use cases that's best for users? And then when I actually understood and learned from the roots of what engineers, not just, I used to always think it was like math based, right? It was like understanding it was about numbers and compare. And when I realized it was actually like, hey, there's this binary that gets obfuscated by these languages, and these languages actually allow you to do kind of the monkey brain type thinking and building and all that. And it's just learning kind of semantics and syntax and understanding just this is how you write it, and this is a language, less than like you actually have to understand how to allocate CPU and RAM and all that stuff, and just be able to think about problems from that level. I was like, oh, this is actually a world that's quite interesting. And I know we're naturally going to get into an AI conversation and it's going to fall in, but yeah, it's I think a lot of people, including myself in the early stages, don't really understand when you think of engineering and what it is to actually be an engineer. It's so much more than just the low level typing and writing code. It's all the stuff that goes before the code gets written on the screen. And that's the stuff that is really like, that's how my brain works. And I think that's a lot of the best engineers I ever met. They're more about how they can perceive problems and think about problems before they even start writing the code, versus just being able to, pull up syntax and code on command and being able to write super fast. That comes after that, after understanding it.
Right. Being able to come up with a plan. And I think that our experiences allow us to avoid any, future problems because we've been there, we've done that, right? So, being able to navigate those situations and being able to scale the problem. I'm still fascinated on how, the original, Mario games work, right? And how they were able to build such a brilliant game with so little resources, right? And when I see that, I fell in love of engineering because it has such an impact in the world, right?
Yeah, totally. And I even still today, I like read up and try to understand how people did. I was learning about the original Doom games too, how they built it. I mean, the problems those guys were solving, they were so beyond anything I think even today engineers think of and have to worry about. It's, like I said, I feel like those were the people who were just wizards and genius when it came to understanding all of that. And we have kind of all the benefits of today of what the people built before us, where we can kind of just use our natural thought process without having it. Now today, obviously with AI and stuff, it's just like all of it's been obfuscated.
Right. I've been struggling about this idea of craftsmanship versus AI augmentation because if you rely too much on AI, then you're not learning to craft, right? And I feel that the quality of agentic coding is lower than when you build it of our craft, basically, right? So, but I'm coming to understanding that that the speed that we can build stuff is so much faster than eventually the quality of the code matter less if the output is what we're desiring, right? If it scales, if the other things that we worry about, right?
Totally. And yeah, it's exactly, it's interesting because one of the questions everyone always asks me, that they know I'm in tech, and they, I obviously am very close with, all the new tooling and tools that exist. They always ask, so like, what's going to happen to our jobs? What's going to happen to the space? How do all this different stuff that people get kind of hooked on, right? The gotchas. And you said it perfectly. It's craftsmanship is that will never be replaced by any, right? Being able to build things and understand how things are built and understand problems and think through problems and all that. That's kind of what makes us special as humans and makes us special as builders and creators and, artists and whatever you want to call it, whatever people do, right? There's a human skill that you have to learn and have to build, no matter how, like I keep using, obfuscated maybe the low level implementation is. Being able to look at things from a million miles up and being able to look down on it and understand where the pieces fit and how they do it. That's what's really the magic. And it's one of these things, I think anyone who has tried to build anything before, whether it is with AI, whether it's 20 years ago, whether they know when they actually try to set out to build it, they understand, okay, whatever I assumed before, however easy I thought it was, all this, I have to play a role for it to succeed. I have to understand how these things work for me to succeed. And yeah, I think it's the reality of being a builder and understanding how things are made, right?
Right. I think that it gives us more empowerment as software engineers. Our role becomes much more important. The amount of contribution we can make on a project becomes much larger, right? Because instead of spending time on syntax, we can spend time on intent. Spec-driven development, it's all about requirements, right? And being able to guide the agents to build what we need to build. The amount of impact we can have is tenfold than what we used to before, right?
Totally. Yep. It's yeah. We're faster today for sure. Maybe a little bit messier, but we're definitely faster.
Right. So you climbed from senior engineer to tech lead to director at Remine, right? What did each of those transitions actually require from you?
Yeah, that's actually an amazing question. One is a lot of good timing. I'll be honest with you. I try to tell this to anyone who's either getting in it or in like looking to move forward in their career and stuff like that. Timing and opportunity is a huge factor. And it's one of these things that you should evaluate, what is the opportunity and all that. Without going into too much detail, right? I think I can getting the job, that is one of these things. I think there's enough stuff online and all that, right? It's kind of, you reach out, you apply. For me, the reason why I ended up going to Remine was because of my real estate experience beforehand. So, while I didn't have too much other than the open source work I did, production level experience, my experience with real estate and understanding the business and the industry really helped. So my mentors that brought me on and taught me, how to do this at a production scale versus just what I knew was from like an open source scale, and go from, I think we had tens of users to hundreds of thousands of users. It was easy for them to be able to teach me how to build correctly because I had all the foundational knowledge of the business and how the business works. So that was kind of the being able to move from, from that senior engineer role to kind of the tech lead. They presented me the opportunity because of my experience and my background and all of that. This project was really struggling to get out the door. I remember going to bed and just being like, wait, what if we did basically start from fresh? But what if we just took the foundation, right, all that work we did, but started fresh on the dashboard side and on the actual product side, and would that do it? And long story short, it ended up working out. We ended up being able to go live after that within 4 months. So from a 2-year project to go live in 4 months and have our first point. So that was kind of how it all happened. I see it two paths as being an engineer, right? You either can go down what I would call the principal route or architectural route where, you just want to be focused on building and the implementation and the low level, how to actually build it. or not even the how, the building, right? You want to be a part of the building. The other side is you want to be a part of the management side. So in the business side, and being able to look at, basically set it up for the principals, for the engineers, and set it up the world for them so they can succeed, which means you have to be able to pull from all the different places in the company, right? Business, operations, sales, product, whatever, right? All those different worlds, and be able to take the technical language, which you understand, and be able to speak with the engineers and communicate and understand the problems and challenges they face, the timings, the frustrations, all that stuff, and be able to word it to the different stakeholders and be like, hey, this are the challenges, these are the problems, and then vice versa, right? It's all about being able to take two sides that don't speak to each other cleanly, right? Who have different needs, different requirements, different pain points, frustrations, and being able to kind of be the middleman, understanding that you have the technical, at the end of the day, you're the person who has the technical understanding to combine the two. So for me, I've always been, like I said, I would never consider myself one of the best engineers, right? I'm not someone was 10x coding and just flying through stuff. My skill was being able to understand problems and being able to think through them and understand needs, and anything that we didn't have fully written out in AC or stuff, I was able to figure out solutions. So that's kind of my world and how I ended up. I think my skill sets and all that ended up being in the position I was.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think you're specializing more on translating from business problems to technical problems and being able to make that bridge and align both teams, because then whatever the team is building is going to build it faster and is going to be able to deliver the expected outcome the business needs, right?
Exactly. And the other thing I would add to that is you have to also in a way humble yourself when you're in this position and stuff, where you have everyone has ideas. I see this all the time. Everyone in the world has ideas. Everyone thinks they know the best way of doing something and all that. But the problem is no one likes to hear their idea is the wrong idea or the bad idea, or it's not the fully fledged out idea. And I think a big part of what I have to catch myself and listen to is, I have principal engineers, I have junior engineers, I have senior, I have all these different stakeholders on the engineering side. They all have different perspectives that are super valid. On the other side, right, I have to understand business has needs, they have, stakeholders, they have different responses, all that. And while something might be so obvious to me on just do this, just do that, you really have to listen hard to all these different stakeholders and all these people to really understand what needs to be communicated at the moment and what needs to be pushed on to actually ever deliver anything. Because there's a million and one good ideas, but if you ever want to actually deliver and show something for the work you've done, you have to take your ego away and understand what is the thing I need to be focusing on and listening to. And the only way to do that is to hear everyone and understand all the different problems and concerns and pushbacks, even if it is against your own initial thought, because you're not always right? You're not always correct on your assumptions or your thought process.
Right. Right. And it's a very, it's an art to figure out which ideas will make sense, which ideas will not make sense. And also you're covering the pressure of the business side, and you have the whole full context. So sometimes, at least it happened to me, when I was an individual contributor, I didn't know the full context. So I didn't know the whys, right? And sometimes, I had ideas that were great, but, without knowing the context, I was in the wrong without knowing it, right?
Total. I'm laughing because I can think of the amount of times when it was just a dev and I was just sitting back and I'm all mad at business. I'm like, sales. I'm like, they don't know what they're doing. Like, why are they selling this? Why are they not understanding that they're doing these things not in spite of engineering, not in spite of anyone. They're doing it because they have priorities and things that they need to execute and deliver on, right? So yeah, it's funny. And then you get the context and then you have different problems. And that's why I said to that point, it's like, if you don't humble yourself in a position of management and when you're that stakeholder, you're the person who's kind of has access now to all the different stakeholders and you can see all the different problems, you end up in a position where everything is just, there's friction constantly, right? There's always friction. And that's the worst thing to ever get anything delivered is if there's friction, things will never be delivered until that friction's resolved. and you have to find a way to resolve that friction. Yeah.
And also being able to listen to everybody and being able to provide good feedback without hurting the ego, or being able to, explain the whys without, sometimes you cannot give the full context, right?
Totally.
Because, the dynamic of the business doesn't allow it, right? So it's a fine line, but at the end of the day, keeping the people motivated and with initiatives, right? If you push too hard, then you kill those initiatives, and that becomes a problem as well, right? So it's yeah.
And the one thing I will
Yes,
say too is trust is a huge. That's another thing that I think a lot of people overlook. I like to think I have. My goal is to build as much trust with my devs as possible, and vice versa, right? Like that relationship and that trust and that understanding helps relieve the friction. Because you're right, there is certain times where it's like, hey, I can't really explain why we have to do this, but I wouldn't be saying this to you if there wasn't a good reason. And vice versa, right? They're saying, hey, like I might be like, hey, I'm worried about, prioritizing. Maybe a good high example that a lot of people could relate with is dealing with tech debt versus trying to implement product, right? And devs always like, let's fix our tech debt. Let's try to do that. And sometimes it's like, no, let's just get this product delivered and all that. And there has to be a trust on, okay, trust me, we'll get the product delivered. I know there's some concerns, but trust why we need to get this out. I promise once this is out, the next priority will be getting that tech debt resolved, right? Or whatever that is. But that is such an important thing, because that's going back to that friction. How do you alleviate those points where like the dev will never understand why we're doing something this way, or vice versa? Maybe, executive staff is like, I will never see this, this optimization or unit tests that you guys are writing on the back end. And it's like, yeah, that's the good news if you never see it. But how do you sell that to an executive team when, it's not something that is ever going to show unless, bugs and stuff. But like the expectation is there's no bugs, right? The expectations are clean release. So how do you be like, well, if we do this, we're going to have clean releases? There's a fine art to all of that conversation, right? And trying to make sure you can, at the end of the day, the thing that's important is delivering, right? Delivering and showing something that's the goal. That's what you have to do, is deliver.
right. The devs I train, I train them on what I call proactive communication, which is this idea of telling, as an individual contributor, which direction I'm going and kind of why I'm taking these decisions. And that way I can provide, visibility of the direction. I can move forward. And if I'm in the wrong direction, I give the opportunity, without stopping my progress, I give the opportunity to get feedback as soon as possible, right? And save time and effort, right? But then on the other hand, to also follow policies, right? The policies of the manager, because if we break those boundaries as individual contributors, we're adding chaos to the whole situation rather than just, aligning to what needs to be done, right? Yes. And in that process, I also teach them about being able to provide feedback. There is an etiquette for providing feedback, right? There's a moment to speak up and say, hey, I see this issue, right? Because if that happens at the wrong time, then it becomes disruptive in the meetings, right? But there's time and a moment and a way to say it that, reduces disruptions, but also give the manager the opportunity to listen to it and, either have the visibility to know about it, or act on it, right? Yes. And I think you're bringing an important point, that is being able to not take personally when whatever initiative is provided, it's been rejected, right? And I haven't realized until we were talking about it that I have been telling people about, we don't have the full context, right? So we don't know the why of the why of the why. So we it's not personal, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's always reminding yourself that it's funny because I'm so guilty. I'm a big, if I don't have the context, my brain automatically tries to fill in that context every single time. Why is something being done this way? And then I'll always do that. And I always have to like tell myself, especially if I'm speaking to someone or, I'm having a casual side conversation, we're trying to figure out why something was done a certain way. I always have to be like, but I'm just guessing. I don't know. It's like I can try to put things together and try to be a detective and figure out all the different, but the truth is, it's like you don't know. And usually when you do that game, you end up trying to find the most complex reason to why something is to get the context, where a lot of times it's something as simple as, someone said something, that's why, or so, something like it's usually always that. And I always find myself like when I do get the context after, and I'm like, wow, I overthought that way too much. All right. But I think it's especially for people like us, like what we do in devs and stuff, it's in our nature to think the most complicated thing and then have to be like, okay, how do we should be simplifying here.
Right. The way that I usually explain this to the devs is our job is to drive the bus, right? If the manager says we have to drive it through the cliff, then we can say, hey, there's going to be a cliff, but we have to drive it as fast as possible towards that direction because that's the instruction, right? And that way we don't know what is behind that hill. We don't know what it's, under the cliff, right? So we have to have the trust to move fast as possible towards the direction that we're instructed to, and not spend time on just, feeling, adding drama to the situation, right?
Totally. But I always say on top of that too is trust but verify, right? Like if there is something that seems like you don't have that context for, or you don't know, like verify and be like, is this really, should we be doing this or all that? One of the first things that I have, there's a dev that he's become such a superstar, and I got him as a junior dev, and he's always someone I talk about when I talk about like someone who's just turned into this amazing developer, came from a junior, just really has flourished in. He was always afraid of asking questions. He was always afraid. And it was like, he didn't want to either come off, stupid or come off nosy or complain. And the minute he started asking questions and the minute you just saw his trajectory go from this, where he's like, I don't feel like I'm getting back, to just being an unbelievable developer. Because, like I said, there'll be sometimes you'll ask questions. I'll be like, just do it. Trust me. That's where we go, the trust conversation. But I'm always so grateful for him. I always try to tell the team and the guys, like, the worst thing I can say is just, trust it. But I'll always be grateful for the question being asked, because without questions, that's how mistakes get made. That's how assumptions. There's a prompt that one of the devs also built where he has to his agent that it runs no matter what. And it's like, do not assume. That's it. And I was like, oh, that's great. That's such a cool prompt to build. Like what? So.
Right. And, changing a little bit of topic, how long has Remine now has been working with Density Labs?
Oh my God. I know since I've started, so since been the last 5 years, I don't know if you know from beforehand how much longer, but at least the last 5-6 years. So it's been, like I said, since I've started at Remine.
Right. Yeah, I don't know exactly when we started working together. I think it was 6 years-ish. Yeah, I don't usually track that time. I'm kind of focusing on the problem that's ahead, but yeah.
Yeah. So.
And tell us a little bit about, what is the experience of having, Density Labs engineering's embedded as part of your team?
Yeah. So this is kind of going to go back to like my mentality and philosophy behind contractors, and right. The reason why there's two, in my opinion, there's two main reasons why you hire contract workers, right? One is you try to save on cost, right? Usually has to do with something along that line. Or two, you have a period of a project, you have a specific project that you're trying to do, and you want to just be able to spin up a group really quick. Usually I see a lot of times, have the contractors kind of manage it, have them manage their own teams and separate and all that. So that's usually like the two mindsets I ever hear people speak about contractors. I actually have a third strong philosophy, and it's really my whole thing, which is it's a easier way to hire and bring on talent, especially on a market that's unstable. Obviously, looking at costs and all that you can bring a team on full time and treat them like full-time workers, but you're able to manage all the kind of hiring, onboarding, offboarding, all that stuff, and leave that over to the contracting firm that is you're working with. So to me, that's kind of the way I look at contractors. It's usually a little different where it's, hey, I need a set of talent. I am looking at the market to bring, see for FTEs and what that looks like. But usually that's a months long process and project. And, with the right firm, and we'll get into that, but with the right partnership, if you can find a contracting group and firm that can bring on talent, vet the talent, know what you're looking for, understand that, and then also let them know that they're being brought on as full-time talent and that they're going to be seen and treated that way because there isn't an end date or an end project and all that. That's kind of the way I always hope, or my goal when bringing on contractors.
Right. I've always seen the philosophically the idea of the embedded staff augmentation as becoming indistinguishable as full time employees, right? And it's because of what you're saying, right? My HR team can take care of all the payroll and all the overhead of that, the admin overhead of that. What I focus is on the making sure that they're fully embedded, right? Culturally aligned, right? And the productivity and the upskill as well, right? But mostly is that, technically, yes, they're vendors, but philosophically and, on the value set to be fully accountable and fully take full ownership of everything they're contributing to, right?
Exactly. And you kind of, and this is large part of the reason why we've had such a long relationship, and through all the different changes and all that, we've never, always been the go-to firm, is that business, like you said, a lot of things happen in the business world, right? A lot of ups, a lot of downs, a lot of complications, a lot of different things that have to happen. And right, when you're just hiring for either the first example or the second example, it kind of detaches that, like you said, it just becomes a vendor. It just becomes someone
Right.
who has no interest in, they just cared, hey, are you paying your fee? Do you have it sent? Cool, thank you. And that's the end of story. And it's like, you even said another interesting point, like culture, right? Like a lot of times these vendors and that stuff, they have their own culture, right? A lot of them work in the same offices together, all that. And they're like, hey, this is our culture. This is how we do things, and it like I said, you're just part-time. It's just, this is going to end one day, this relationship. And right, we're not going to change the way we do things. And then so it for us, like, which has been so amazing with Densa, is that we're able to just bring people on who get it. And when there's ever anything, I can pick up the phone, I can call you, I can speak to it, I can speak to any of the guys, and we can have these conversations like you would have with an FTE, like you would have, with a partner, with, anything like that. And it's a rare relationship, because not like the other, by the way, I want to be clear, it's like contractors that bring on for project-based works or for, just quick value solutions to try to solve. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's plenty of use cases that is super important. But for what we're looking for, and what I do and what I look for, that third option is so rare to find. And it's so important because it's all the things that we talked about earlier in this conversation you can implement. And the way I kind of build teams and kind of set up my teams, it's so important for that type of relationship.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's a philosophical difference, because otherwise it's a transactional relationship versus a mutual symbiotic relationship, right? Yeah, and that's why I get involved really deep on how the team operates and how they contributed and how much they speak up, right? Because again, we want to be able to say, hey, we see this wrong, we see this issue, we see this problem, and we try to provide that feedback and information, but at the same time trying not to add friction to the process, right? There's a specific way to do that, right? That it's a nuance, but it's what gives you it builds trust with you and the team, and also helps you to navigate and avoid the risks, right? That can be ahead, right?
Totally.
And what contributions stand out from to you from the Density Labs engineering teams over the years?
I can think a lot. I think the biggest one is we've had Density Labs engineers become tech leads of teams at different points in Remine's history. To me, that's like I remember when, in the absence of names, but I remember when like the first time we put a density engineer as the lead of our main core application. And I remember at the time, like I got some head rolls and eyes like, is this the right thing to do? Like, why really should we be doing this? Like, and rightfully so, right? A lot of the concerns, like what happens if they leave, right? We don't have the same type of control that, most people understand with that. And this goes back to the latter where we were speaking about like our relationship and us being able to understand that, hey, if we do these type of things and yeah, like the thing that stands out the most. So obviously it went really well, really good thing. But that engineer told us, "Hey, I'm actually looking to leave because I'm looking for a full-time gig and I'm trying to, be more. I don't want this contracting type of role." I remember you and I looking at each other, speaking and trying to figure, like, "Crap, this is a big deal. He's our best, one of our best engineers. Been an amazing lead. Like, we don't have an obvious replacement for him, and more than that, we don't want him to walk. Like, and we want to be able. And we found a solution to be able to bring him on at the time to Remine full time and figure out a solution to have him get what he wanted. We'd keep what we wanted, and you were so willing and open to try to form that relationship and make it work. Now, it didn't end up at the end of the day working out. Like after a few months, it ended up being what it ended up being. But just that ability, like that could have happened with an FTE, right? Like that doesn't change what we were talking about and what we're trying to do. So for me, that's like huge that's from like a Density Labs kind of contribution and all that. From a individual solution, I'll say, and there's a current contractor we have on the team, and he's become our go-to front-end developer. And it's one of these skills that I don't know. This might be controversial, or a lot of people will be like, what the hell am I saying? Right. But I think it's hard to find good front-end devs today. I think most people, because of what we talked about, the obfuscation of code and being able to kind of build things and ideate, the art of being able to build, actually be the ones that implement and being able to build UI and UX is a lost art, because it's usually like it goes to a UX or UI team. There is a designer and all that, and devs just kind of copy the mocks and wireframes and implement. And that skill of like a real developer, truly talented dev that's fully focused on the front end. And we got one from Density Labs, and he's just been one of these assets that everyone in the company, everyone that did, like, we just go to him. Like there's some front end work we hadn't had for the longest time a UX UI designer at Remine. And he's just been the go-to guy. And it's just been one of these things that it's just happened, right? Wasn't planned. We didn't even bring him on for that reason. We knew he had that experience, but that wasn't the reason. And now that I'm saying it, we have the same thing for our mobile dev, and we had the same thing with him for mobile. That, again, he wasn't. So yeah, it's just like these things stand out. Where how rare is that, where you bring on a contractor, and you're bringing them on just to add another body to the team, not with like necessarily a specific, like the skill set was what we were looking for, but not like and they end up being kind of the go-to domain expert knowledge holder for us. We're a company with a bunch of FTs as well. And those are some really cool, rare experiences I think kind of encapsulate the whole thing that I'm trying to get at, which is contractors can be so much more than just project-based people or discount employees, right? They can be real contributors that really, really play a huge role in the growth and development of a tech company and startups.
Right. Yeah, I mean, for me, what you're describing makes me feel so proud of the team, because I know the team from juniors, and how much I coach them to become better, more involved in the projects and things like that. And at the end of the day, it's their effort and their contributions, right? But I am proud because I am part of that, of their growth and how much they're contributing. So I'm proud of that, of their achievements. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I feel it's funny you say that. That's something I mean, obviously I feel the same way, just because I've seen them in the same growth, but One of my favorite things, one of the parts I love most about my job, and I'm a huge proponent, and anyone who's worked with me, especially on the leadership side and executive side, they know this about me. I'm a huge proponent on hiring junior engineers. And I know it's kind of like an outdated thing today, but there's just something about being able to find that person, that someone who's trying to get their career started, and seeing them become more, right? It's one of those things that it's like, there's no better feeling in the world, and there's nothing like it's something that's so cool to see and experience and watch someone grow and learn, and it's one of the coolest things. And like I said, I get the pride part, because there is like a lot of pride where it's like, whoa, this is really cool, this is special.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I spend a lot of time just working with juniors to help them become better. Building trainees programs. A lot of effort because of that feeling of helping them accomplish. In particular, what I've seen happening in Mexico and in Latin America is that path, when executed successfully, it is a life changer for the people involved, right? Because they are in a situation where there are less work opportunities, there are less economic growth. So being able to help them, going through that path, and then they buy the first car, they buy a house, they start building a family, and I contributed through that process. For me, it's the proudest moment. And when they invite me to their wedding, they invite me to their house celebration, inauguration, or whatever you call it.
Yeah.
I it made me feel very proud. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I for me, it's adding not just the technical part, but also the cultural thing, right? Teaching them to work on a different culture. And the way that I kind of explain this is, it's not about the Mexican culture versus the US culture. Let's build a better culture where we take the best of both worlds, right? So that way they don't feel like second-class citizen. They don't have to stop being themselves. They can just become better for the for the contribution of the team, right?
And I'm in LA, so we're pretty much second version of Mexico here. So it feels like home being around that. I always joke with the guys, I'm like, you got to come out one day, because it's really, it's the Mexican culture so integrated here, and it's one of those really awesome. I mean, it's the cool thing about it. I like living in LA. It's a melting pot of communities. So.
Right, so many communities, and the Mexican community there is very strong, and the food is amazing. In LA, San Diego, all that area, it's
Amazing.
greatest food. Yeah.
I always, every Sunday, I go get my tamales from the corner. It's like my favorite thing.
Right. Yeah, and the here in Mexico, depending on who you ask, they all have their favorite tamale, kitchen, and they go and get them, and it's so amazing. I do enjoy the tamales. Yeah.
Yeah, tamales top 5 food. I've said that I will die on that hill. Tamales a top 5 food that exists. So.
Right. Tamales and tacos, and I coming from Argentina, we didn't have a lot of spice food. So here I realized that spice is multidimensional, and it kind of vibrates on different parts of your body. I find it, amazing. Yeah.
Amazing. The best. Yep, totally.
Yes. So looking at how this partnership has evolved over the years, what is the one thing you wish more engineering leaders understood about working with cross-border engineering teams?
It's a good question. I don't know if I wish people understood it anymore, but I think it just goes back to kind of like globalization and that understanding that like we have this ability to access, we can just be on this call right now, right? And you can be in Mexico, I can be here. We can communicate, we can send things. The globalization of the world, right? It's the ease of being able to do that. So I just think it's one of these things where it's like understanding your business, understanding your needs, and not ruling out like what works best for your current situation, right? I think a lot of people, I think one of the big things I hear is a language barrier, right? People get scared of not understand. And this is a very American thing, if I have to say, where it's like, you don't speak the way I speak, and how am I going to understand you, or stuff like that, and understand me. But it's just like you might have someone who doesn't communicate well English to English, right? You develop that, right? And this is why there is vetting and communication, making sure things are a good fit and stuff like that. But I think there's a lot of people don't like what they don't know, and people like to do what they're comfortable with. And that kind of goes not just with this aspect, but with anything, right? It's hard to devs don't like to move to new tools because they're comfortable with the old tools that they have, right? People like AI, people are scared to adopt it because they're worried of X, Y, and Z, versus the only way you truly know if something's going to work is you try it out, you experience it, you ask the right questions, you do all of that. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have some like profound answer to that question, but I think the simplest thing is just like, if you think there's an issue with onboarding an out of country contractor or work or relationship, it's like, if that's what's stopping you from looking into it and going it, that's just you kind of already lost, right? Like you gotta at least try it out and see if it makes sense for you.
Right. Yes, I completely agree. There's a lot of misunderstanding on that. What I do with it, I mean, on my side, I spend additional time screening people because we have the cultural and the technical expertise. So I check not only that they speak English, but also if they can communicate clearly. I think that's more important than accent, or it's a communication style. Yes, and something that I kind of talked a little bit. It's the isolation, the control of isolation that the team can have. It's something that with a cross-border team you can manage more in a much more finer grain, right? Because you can clearly define how that communication with the rest of the company is going to be. If you have a culture in the company, you can create like a phoenix. You can create a culture within a culture, because that team is going to be more isolated, right? So that allows you to build a culture that it's your own, and then less dependent on the company culture. But if you want to align it, you can do it as a manager. If you want to isolate it, you can do it as well, right? There's a lot of benefits to doing one or the other, right? Yeah. And then the other thing that while I was hearing you, I remember it's on my book. I have this thesis about AI arbitrage, labor arbitrage, right? I mean, labor arbitrage is finding talent with lower living costs, right? AI arbitrage is let's use the agents to be more productive, right? But I argue that the context, having a long tenure team, becomes much more important, because a long tenure team can manage the agents because they understand the full context of a business, all the decisions that has been being made throughout the years, right? And that becomes much more important than which model you're using or how much labor arbitrage are you getting, right?
Absolutely. I love that you use the words arbitrage in that. I think that's a good way of explaining it, where it's like, I mean, AI is its own monster of a topic, and we can go into detail, but yeah, it's this constant. At the end of the day, the purpose of labor and the purpose of AI. There's somewhere where they cross paths, and there is like, hey, can AI reduce the amount of labor you have? But that's because your labor is performing extremely well with the AI that they're using. It's less about the AI replacing the labor. It's a weird mindset that people like. You're like, well, if you're not, it's more of, hey, I have a team of, let's just say 2 devs. Typically, the work I need to do, I would need a team of 4 devs, just because we have deadlines and everything. But the 2 devs can hit the deadline now because they know how to leverage AI to help speed up their workflow process. Yeah, so it's exactly, there's maybe like a third AI labor arbitrage where they combine the two, and you can try to play the two into doing that. But I think there's a misconception that a lot of companies, and I see this all over the place, especially with startups, where they think they can get away with not really having a labor force or a true team or a true culture, like you said, a foundation labor source, and because they can replace that with AI. And I think that a lot of people go wrong with that type of mindset. I think, like you said, you got to build out the operation before you can introduce AI to implement, right? You have to give it something to implement and something to manage it and operate it and all of that. And that part of that architecture, that of building a company or a business, part of that is labor, and labor leverages a tool of AI to be more productive.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, I am a great proponent of AI augmentation rather than replacement, right? And it's exactly what you're saying. I mean, I used to spend a lot of time on syntax issues, and now I can be more empowered by using agents that can automate things. But if I don't provide, me as a human, don't provide the requirements, don't provide the guidance and the feedback to the agents, they're going to just run in circles and not deliver the expected outcome, right?
Totally. Funny enough, I was just speaking to one of our principal engineers. He's a true 10Xer, one of the best devs you'll ever meet. For the longest time, I was like asking him, like, hey, do you use AI? Like, have you implemented your workflow? And, he was like, I've tried, but it's just like I find myself being able to write the code faster and deliver it. And I laughed, and I'm like, well, yeah, because you shouldn't be doing that. What you should do is build out the AI to do, like you said, the syntax and everything. But like, you have the benefit of, how to build it better than any AI can do it. So don't asking the AI to do it is not, tell it what to do, right? Give it the guardrails, give it the stuff, tell it, so you can then spend your time being more productive on, right, whatever else it is that you need to do. And one of the fastest ways, if any dev that's adamant on not using AI or doesn't like it, build a little AI agent with certain skills or that, and just have it write unit tests for you. So anytime you finish it, because no dev wants to write unit tests, no devs want to write tests at all, right? I'm like, do that, or have it write, your merge requests, right? Your, whatever, have it write documentation of the work. Have it do something like that everyone knows you don't want to do it. Don't have it write code for you. Don't have it do, but just have it do these and see how that goes, right? Like that's a lot of times and it's funny because I think that a lot of times that's an eye-opening experience of like, oh, this is just another tool. It's not this complex. It's just a tool, just like React obfuscated JavaScript, and JavaScript, obfuscated. It's just another tool that exists, another tool at your disposal.
Right. And I see a lot of the false positives that happens with agents that so confidently tells you the wrong things, right? And if you're not aware of that, then or you don't have the experience, then you can accept things that shouldn't. And once you have that experience, and then you give the feedback and the corrections to the agents, the amount of productivity boost that you can get is huge, right?
Exactly. But it's like you said, it's that step-by-step implementation. It's that understanding the tool, understanding what you need for productivity, understanding what you can do better or more, and yeah, a lot of times I think it's easy. I think the people that have been able to onboard it and use it are the people who kind of more used to do what I do, right? Or, like been more in that management or tech they know how to communicate out the needs or the requirements. I think a lot of people that, tend to just be able to just put on headphones, crank out code, do it like that. It's hard. And I get it, because it's a lot of these tools that have been built and a lot of these ways people do use AI isn't this way. So for them, the videos you see online and the training sessions and all of that basically is not, it's not a lot of times for those type of people. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, and it's so early on. I mean, the way people are going to start figuring out how to use it and develop it and build it. There's so much cool stuff that's about to be built and workflows that are about to exist. So
amazing. JJ, we're running out of time. I truly appreciate you being here today. Any final advice to our audience before we wrap it up?
no, just just grind, work hard. If you just take everything one step at a time. And I think my big message is deliver, implement and deliver. Don't stop doing that.
JJ, thank you very much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Federico.